Faced with heavy criticism of its handling of the Indian economy, the Modi government has rolled out arguably the single biggest economic reform measure since it came into power. The deep cuts in corporate tax rates are an attempt to stimulate investment and revive growth. There's also been a backlash from those who feel that this decision has been taken very late and has been taken under extreme duress. To talk about the roadmap for reviving the Indian economy on the back of this big tax cut, I want to welcome to the India Today Conclave the Vice Chairman of the government's premier economic think tank, one of the country's top economists, Dr. Rajiv Kumar. So welcome. The decision your government has taken yesterday changes the entire context of our conversation. But I want to start by asking you, of all the various measures that could potentially have been taken, why has the Modi government picked a deep cut in corporate tax rates as the one fiscal stimulus you believe is most opportune for the economic challenges we face at this moment?
Well, Rahul, I think the rationale is very simple. It was clear that the investor sentiments, the so-called animal spirits, were flagging. And this had been discussed before. You know that 97% of the firms had already been covered by the announcement that they will pay 25% up to a turnover of 400 crore, etc. So there was not a large number left, but these are the people who are the movers and the shakers and the larger guys. And and they are the ones who clearly influence the sentiment. And therefore the idea was, that's one thought, that this is what you needed to get the investor sentiment, reverse the the sort of dormant animal spirits. The second is that you have to sort of, and it's always been the government's policy to come in to align itself with the rates in the Southeast Asian economies. And you had to also, and if you notice the nice sweetener there, which is the 15% plus, if you were going to invest until the 31st of March, is actually directly aimed at those who will be leaving this Pearl River Delta, the South China.
You're saying very nonchalantly that it's always been our aim to align with Southeast Asian economies. I wish that were the case, because if it were, you would have announced this in a very structured fashion in the union budget, rather than having to present 4 mini budgets on the side.
You see, one, that's water down the bridge, so let's not paddle there. Let's sort of look forward. And the second thing is that from the first budget onwards, Finance Minister Jaitley had made this announcement, but it was going to take a sort of conjunction of factors to be able to get there. And the process had started. The process of reducing the tax rates and making it simple had started from that time onwards. Of course, it has taken it's taken what has come to being to trigger this. But as I said, as you would know, that this is one situation which is much better, but better late than never.
Most of the politicians we speak to seem to be in denial on the economic problems that this country faces. Very few accept that at least part of the problem that we're having to deal with is of the making of this government and some of the measures that you've implemented. As an economist, I hope your perspective on this is slightly different, and you accept that yes, we're having to fix a problem, part of which is of our own creation.
I don't know about the latter part, because I think we inherited a very bad hand. We inherited a very bad hand. If you look at the figures, 2011 onwards.
So when you're saying we inherited a bad hand in 2019 or 2014?
14. Of course 14. But
you inherited a tough hand in 2019 also.
Yeah, and it has taken a long time for us, to extricate the economy out of that, and especially in the credit side, because the credit growth of the banking sector has been on a steep decline. I mean, at the moment, actually, as we speak, the exporting sector has a negative credit growth of 35%, and it had gone down to negative about 40-odd%, no, even more. So there are several things there. And then the other thing, which is that you cannot, of course, you have to prepare the economy for being, for not worsening the equity within the system. Because that's the other fear. So, I mean, a lot of time was spent, therefore, in the first 5 years to making sure that once you get the growth, once you step on the accelerator, then the people who are who are at the bottom of the queue, at the bottom of the pyramid or the last of the queue, would get those benefits and not just get the trickle-down effect.
The tax cuts that have been announced will lead to revenue foregone to the extent of 1.45 lakh crores. That's serious money, about 0.7 of the GDP, taking the fiscal deficit up to 4%. Where is this money going to come from? What's the government's plan? How will this tax cut be financed?
I hope you're not surprised to know that we've done lots of detailed sums on it, and the fact is that this will and can come from two sources. One, of course, is the buoyancy of the growth itself, which means that the growth factor, because in the past our tax buoyancy has been very good, and therefore both your indirect and direct tax revenues collected will go up with the growth, and also the Laffer curve will work, which is basically that once you lower the growth rate, tax rate, you get more. That's the first source, and which can be quite robust. The second one, of course, is non-tax revenues, and we have in Niti Aayog and otherwise in the North Block done the sums that this investment can yield to you an extra. The target is 1 lakh crores. This budget itself.
In this year itself.
That's the budget target. That's the budget target, and you know that there are 24 public sector companies which the cabinet has approved to be disinvested. Now, if you only take those into consideration and you actually are able to disinvest, complete that disinvestment taken 2 years ago almost, and that's the process that you need to now focus on, and there's a strong focus on that. You can collect up to net 1.3 lakh crores. Net meaning gross, not just gross revenues, gross receipts, but minus the liabilities that that will have to go.
But how soon will some of these companies be disinvested? Because we've been hearing about this for months on end. You haven't done it yet. For example, Air India.
You see, Air India is not one of the 24.
Sure.
So let's not talk about that. It's a separate case altogether. These are 24, and I don't remember all the names, and neither do I need to reveal them. But the thing is that this is where, I'm sure you will see a huge amount of focus in the coming days by the government, in the Ministry of Finance, in DIPAM, to get this over. Niti is inherently involved in that. We are the ones who are sort of recommending, pushing, etc. But that's one part of it, and that will yield you an additional over the budget of 52,000 crore. You got another 50 odd crore from the RBI additional this year, which was not included in the budget. So that's a lot. And then you have the whole source of asset monetization. And I have got the list here, which is that you have power transmission lines, you have railway stations, 50 big ones, you have golf courses, you have stadiums, you have roads, 10,000 kilometers of that. If you tot them all up, it's a very large figure, but if you could do even 20-30% of those, and there is no reason to believe that you won't be able to do so, I think you are well home and dry. And so this whole fiscal deficit issue, I don't think we will leave a gaping hole there, because the Prime Minister is committed to this, and that is why we have done the sums.
You think there will be no hole at all, or there will be some hole?
There will be some, but which will be very marginal. And as far as I am concerned, I have gone public many, many times that I am not a fiscal hawk, and everybody, even including the rating agency, will accept something of a minor slippage if the growth picks up and the momentum carries on.
Okay, so you're speaking of growth. I want to show data on the back of the screen on where we are at when it comes to growth at this moment. And I want to understand from you, Dr. Kumar, where you believe this year will end when it comes to India's growth numbers. We're at 5%, which is deeply embarrassing. We are closer to the Hindu rate of growth than the double-digit rate of growth that you projected or promised when you won power, or your party won, or the BJP won power. Where do you think growth will go in the next quarter? And there it is. It just makes for very, very embarrassing reading. Just keeps slipping down and down. So are we going to go down further?
This graph is, by the way, etched in one's mind. So I mean, only to.
It's scarred in one's soul as well.
Well, yes, of course, if you like. Yeah. But I think we've bottomed out with this. We had a day before, we had what we call the economist huddle, where you had about 35 good economists coming there, and general consensus was that we have now bottomed out in the second quarter, which looked very bad at one stage, but now the IIP numbers, etc., are out. I think it will be higher than the first quarter, and then the second half will be far more robust. So what I think we will get, I think we will clearly beat the OECD latest revision, which is below 6, we will achieve more than 6 and about, I think, closer to 6.5. So that the second quarter will be surely above 7, nearer 7.5 as a whole.
The second quarter?
The second half.
Second half.
The second half.
No, because you're saying that the second quarter will be possibly lower than 5%.
No, it will be higher.
It will
be higher. We have, I think the first quarter marks the bottoming out of the cycle, and we will begin to pick up from here. And that was the sort of pretty much the majority view in this economist huddle, that we will have a higher print in the second quarter.
And what's your view?
I think so. I agree. I think
because I want to show you how we're no longer the fastest growing economy. One of your biggest pitches politically has been India is the fastest growing economy under us.
Just for 1 year. Before that, we were fastest. Just this quarter have we slipped below the Chinese rate. But otherwise, we have been above them quite comfortably. And we will go back again because the Chinese growth is stuttering. We know all of that, stuttering, and it will become lower. But we are the only $1 trillion economy which will achieve 8% plus growth in the coming years. And that's, I mean, I think there are so many, we talk about the potential rate of growth of potential output. There are so many sectors and areas, where there is growth bottled up. I mean, agriculture to begin with. I mean, there's just no reason to believe that agriculture will continue to provide only 14-15% of our GDP with 43% of our labor, blocked in there. If we modernize agriculture today, which is what the government has set out to do, it has set up a chief ministers committee headed by Mr. Fadnavis to take all the structural reform measures that are needed to be taken. I mean, it's agriculture, our exports, our energy efficiency, our credit, and the credit growth. I mean, Rahul, you would know that in the private debt to GDP ratio in India, private debt, which is private corporates and household to GDP debt, is only 54%. It's almost about 160 odd percent in China. I mean, US can afford very much because there's the reserve currency, so there's more than 200%. But for us, the credit to GDP growth being at 54 offers a huge runway for us, and that's where we need and we expect, and the finance minister is taking steps to make sure that your credit growth in the economy, and credit growth which is if you like risk assessed credit growth, takes off and improves, and this will happen.
One of the reasons why credit growth hasn't taken off is also because sentiment is down. While of course yesterday's move is being hailed, do you believe that is adequate to address the issue of sentiment and trust? What more, because the Niti Aayog is constantly pushing the government to take more decisions, more reform, what more are you pushing for?
This is, in my view, it's the start. And there is, and already, by the way, now all the steps that have been announced before in the 3 packages, and a large number of reforms and initiatives that are in the pipeline will begin to have a much greater impact in this background, because otherwise there was this overhang of pessimism. And so each one will be seen in a better light as we go forward. And just for starters, there is this doing business, ease of doing business. Now we are going to have a survey based on investor perception, and then
can I just show you what's at the back of the screen? So you're seeing in 2016 we're growing fast, and then we are comparing here with Vietnam, India, China, Egypt, Indonesia, the United States. Then we get overtaken first by Vietnam. The Chinese were behind us, then the Chinese also overtake us, Egypt goes ahead of us, Indonesia goes ahead of us. So we're really slipping. So this whole narrative, election narrative, that under us we are the fastest growing economy of the world, is actually not correct.
Rahul, great graphics, but doesn't hide the fact that India was and will be the fastest growing economy, large economy in the world for years to come. Because we have the potential, we have the all the structural factors in place, and I don't think it takes a lot, for us to release this growth the growth.
I want to contest that by putting to you what Dr. Atin Roy, who's a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, has written in a now widely cited article where he says India is headed, he fears, towards a middle income trap. Like a Brazil, like a South Africa, there's a very real fear, he believes, that we will get stuck in a middle income warp and not be able to, like a South Korea or a China, raise the level of income of the bottom of the pyramid.
That takes the debate completely to a different level. At the moment, our per capita income is below $2,000, right? No, it's about $1,900 odd. If we double it in the next 5 years, it will be we'll be closer to about 5,000, about 4,000 odd. Now that still leaves us sort of just short of the low middle income. So the middle income trap starts at above $8,000, $10,000. I mean, there is a huge potential here already. So those who are talking about a middle income trap and talking about the fact that we will not be an advanced economy, we will not do a Korea at 22,000, above $22,000, etc., fail to recognize that even China, with its 3 decades of 9% growth, is today at about $5,000+ economy. Now that will, if we achieve that, we will be the second largest in nominal terms, and probably the second largest and third largest in nominal terms, and the second largest in PPP terms by a long shot. And that India is already going to be a completely different ball game, completely different scenario. So I mean, talking about the middle income trap is really, honestly, completely out of place at the moment. Because we are wanting to remove. We have, for example, between 2005 and 16. Moved 270 million people out of poverty. We have another 200 million to go take that way. So talk about middle income traps at the moment. That's the first part. And the second part is that given our structural factors, given our our working age to total age, population ratios, given our savings propensity, given our investment in the past, which has reached 39%. See, we are not an economy which is like the Latin Americans, only a very low investment to GDP ratio economies. No, our entrepreneurial class, our middle class is a savings class, is an investing class, and they have demonstrated that in the past. So there is no danger at all. And I took on Ratin in the same Mind Summit, where and I don't think he is able to counter the argument that India's structural factors, India's structural strengths are such that once we get going, there is probably but again, I mean, I'm not going to talk about above the middle income, because that itself is a big challenge. To get our per capita income above 5,000 is a huge achievement and a challenge. But we will get there, because that's what it takes to get to a $5 trillion.